Hi BookTube, and welcome to a tag video. We are doing today the BookTube Cliche tag. I was tagged by Richard at History Lit, and I'm going to put in my description box a link to his channel, a link to his original video. There'll also be a list of the questions, because of course below that I'm going to put a list of the people that I'm tagging. We're going to get right away on with this because I've got one of those three video recording day. Don't get those very often, but when they happen, they take the whole day, but they're very good because they store up a lot of material for me, and it helps me out a lot in the days after that. So let's get right to those questions. Question 1. The cliche is actions speak louder than words, and what I meant to name is a book that wasn't or couldn't be better than the film. I'm going to flip that question round, everybody, because if you follow my channel, in fact, even if you've only watched a few videos, I bet you've already picked up that I do not watch. Well, I watch hardly any television. Doctor Who, right? I've been watching Doctor Who. but films, I see maybe 3 or 4 films a year. Books are my thing. But what I am going to do is I'm going to name a book that is probably never going to make a good film. And that is Jane Austen's Persuasion. Now, I know adaptations have been made. I have seen clips of one that I think recently aired on Netflix. And it's clear, even from the clips, that the creators decided that they were just going to have to change the character of the protagonist and also the circumstances of the story to such a degree that really using the Jane Austen's novel in their title is a little dishonest, because they're only using the novel as a springboard for inspiration to move to quite a different story. The protagonist of Persuasion, Anne Elliot, is quiet, she's anxious, she's the middle child of 3 girls in a very wealthy, titled family. And that family, they ignore her, they neglect her, they push her off into a corner, they don't want to hear from her. So the drama in the novel is internal. Anne was pressured 8 years ago. The novel opens and tells you that 8 years ago she was proposed to by a man that her family did not approve of. She was pressured to reject him. Now, 8 years on, he has come back from a brilliant naval career. He's a much, much better marriage prospect. However, is he going to remember the pain of having been turned down the first time? Would he even make a second proposal? Does he like someone else? Is he already married? All these things. Anne she can't ask him directly. That this is the early 19th century. One just did not do that. The external events that actually happen are very lightweight. There are lots of conversations over tea. There are little meetings in Bath, in all the lovely places that wealthy people stood around in their pretty clothes and talked. But you're just not going to see any external drama, not a great deal. It's Anne's emotions and her memories and what she's wrestling with every time she sees this man. That's what creates drama. Now, films are sometimes better than novels when it comes to creating external drama, because what you can see is always very impactful. But I think novels are always better than films when most of the drama is happening inside someone's head. Okay, question 2. The cliche is the grass is always greener on the other side. And I meant to name a book that has sort of a rags to riches, riches to rags kind of story. I'm going to name a play. I'm going to name Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, which was based on the 1592 translation from the German of the original work by Faust, which is now, I think, called the Faustbuch. So being a kind of a seminal work as far as English language is concerned, if you watch any other story, and of course I won't be able to think of books and films now if I haven't written them in my lovely notes, but there are lots of stories which follow the line of man sells his soul to the devil or somebody powerful in exchange for money and power and fame, or all 3 of those at once. And then of course eventually that karma all comes back to bite him. And this is the story on which all those other stories get their inspiration from. So I always think it's good to go back to the source. And, there used to be a video on YouTube of the Globe's 2011 production of Dr. Faustus. It was really, really worth watching. It's sadly no longer available. So we have to hope that one of the 2 big Shakespeare production companies, RSC or the Globe, decide to get a cast together and do Dr. Faustus again, because I would definitely then point you in that direction, because it is a really great play to watch. Question 3. The cliche is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I'm to talk about a parent-child relationship in a book that I loved. Well, let's just hold love in abeyance. I have different feelings about the books that I'm going to show you. First of all, Elizabeth Strout's Amy and Isabel, which you know I read recently. I love this book because it shows how similar a child can be to their own parent without realizing it, but also that parents are not always the more mature person in the parent-child relationship. Sometimes a parent can be fighting too many of their own demons, and that makes them less effective at helping their child deal with growing up. Also, I want to include We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. Now, it's not a parent-child relationship that anybody is going to love. It's not about love. And I think that's what fascinated me about this book, because it pointed out an example of a situation where there isn't a bond between mother and son, or it isn't healthy. It never quite works out. There is something seriously wrong, and the horror of this book, and how mother and son nevertheless have to find some way to be mother and son. I found that fascinating. Question 4, and the cliche is, you can't judge a book by its cover. And I meant to name a great book that needs a better cover. Well, it's rare for me to have strong feelings about covers. I feel that book covers, they are for the book business in one way or another. They are for the publishers and booksellers and marketing people. They determine them, and there's something they hope will help the book sell better. So they'll have different reasons. Sometimes they want to reveal what's in the book. Sometimes they want to conceal what's in the book. And sometimes they just want to conform to a fashion that's going on in physical books. And if I were to think of some concealment examples, some good ones are Giovanni's Room, or at least this copy of. You would not guess at all what Giovanni's Room was about, going by the artwork on this cover, but it is very beautiful. And then, of course, we could go back to Elizabeth Strout's Amy and Isabel. That's such a quiet cover, and it belies just how much heartache is underneath it. So you could see there's a thematic thing going on in the cover there. It is revealing something. It's revealing the theme that is, on the outside, these people will seem very everyday, but that's it. Don't go looking inside, because it'll be very different there. Or I could talk about some covers are just, they're designed to be shocking. They want to get your attention that way. And for that, I definitely think of Percival Everett's Erasure. This was the copy that when I saw it in the bookstore, I wanted the book so badly. From the back right up, the little extracts I was reading, I thought, oh, this is a really good book. I need to read this. But I was thinking, how am I going to walk through a bookstore with this on the cover book? I managed. And then finally, I think I have a copy. It's a 1996 vintage paperback of Jeanette Winterson's Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. And I've seen a lot of really good covers for this book. This is kind of a puzzling cover, I suppose. I didn't feel badly about it, because at the end of the day, I get from the book what to me, the important thing that happens to me is when I open the book and I read the text. Covers, I sort of think, okay, if they miss the mark a little bit, I don't worry about it too much. But this one, because it was an old painting, I kind of thought, is this a historical novel of some kind? Does it go back into, I don't know, the Middle Ages? It just had that kind of look to it. You can even see the cracks in the old painting, and the candle and the table made me think, okay, it's something about religion. It really didn't. To find myself in sort of in the 1960s in the north of England was, with a working class family. I thought, right, okay, I wasn't expecting that. So it was interesting. That particular cover didn't quite help me at all, I suppose. And yet I still find it quite beautiful. So I don't mind. There you go. That's how little covers trouble me. Question 5. The cliche is, you can't please everyone. And I'm supposed to talk about a book that I either hated or loved, which most people had the opposite reaction to. They either loved or hated. Okay, well, I've got a good one, and so get ready to groan. I'm expecting you to. I'm going to talk about the Twilight series, which, in case you're thinking, I loved. Okay, and I know some people are going to go, what? What? How did you? I read the whole series. I read it in less than 2 weeks, and I love it. No, I do not regard the novels as great literature, and I'm not going to reread them. Some books are not rereaders, but that doesn't make them not worth reading, okay? I'm going to advocate, and I'm going to pause and advocate for the joy, the justification of the joy of choosing a book that you can just dive into and you get completely lost. It takes you so far away from reality that you feel as though you're lucidly dreaming the events of the book and being in it. And that is what the Twilight series provided its readers. And it was very powerful. And I think we suffer a little from a Puritan hangover in Western culture that pressures us to shame ourselves about this type of enjoyment. And it happens whether you like horror or whether you like crime and thrillers. There's books in other genres that will do this same thing. Twilight happens to be a supernatural romance, but other genres are available which will do the same thing. But I think we've got to just stop thinking there's no benefit in just letting ourselves be out of ourselves for a while. Surely in books it's got to be the safest way to do that kind of thing. And I also want to present a counter argument against the criticism that I did hear about the Twilight novels, and that's of course about the protagonist, Bella Swan. She gets criticized for being a passive, weak female who's obsessed with just having and keeping her boyfriend. You know, how old-fashioned is that? How 19th century? I say no, that is not what the book is about. That is not who Bella Swan is. You need to take a look at the cover graphic, which of course is it's hinting at Eden, isn't it? It's hinting at that moment that Eve takes the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because she's heard the serpent say, if you eat of it, you will become like a god. Okay? Just bear that in mind. The correct understanding of this fantasy scenario is that in Twilight, supernatural things are real and destiny is fated. Okay? Alice Cullen is a vampire who can see the future. She shares her visions with some of the other characters. And yes, she warns them, things can alter a little bit, but it's interesting how often they do not, how often things are locked in. So Bella's destiny is what the series is about. She is going to become, well, not just a vampire. Follow me while I go through this. For Bella, she's not passive and weak. She is disengaged and uninterested in the business of being a typical American adolescent cis-hetero female. Boys are not interesting her. Girls are not really interesting her. Clothes and parties and music and all those other things that adolescents do in the culture around her, none of that interests her. Bella doesn't fit in. She knows she doesn't fit in. And at the opening of the first book, she's wondering, what kind of future has she got if she can't find a way to, if she can't find where she belongs? And then she meets the Cullens, Edward in particular, and something changes. And that's because this meeting is the first stage in the fulfillment of her ultimate destiny. And that is going to allow her to live a completely different life, one where she does fit in, one where she can find friends who are true to her, and she can find someone who interests her enough for her to even consider starting a relationship, and that someone loves her unconditionally. And to be truthful, the series is mainly a demonstration of what love is, what rules it would have to follow to prove that it is unconditional. But what drew me and held me about this novel was that Bella's new life as a woman gives her astounding power. Remember the words of the serpent, that you eat of this fruit, you become like a god. By the end of the series, you could argue that that's what Bella Cullen is. She is the most powerful of all the vampires because her gift allows her to shield herself from the supernatural gifts of the other vampires. She is more powerful than Edward Cullen because she's a younger vampire, yes, but because she can also prevent him from using his power over her. And Bella gets what we all wish we could have. So there is a wish fulfillment in the book. It's the ability to defy age, the ability to go without sleep, to have endless energy, sharper senses. It is the Faustian dream without having to actually sell your soul, although Twilight never really establishes whether or not vampires have souls. It goes back and forth on that argument, never really concludes. And I think most Twilight fans, they just made up their own minds about that. Now, before you come to the conclusion that I think the Twilight series is a flawless collection of books, can't be viewed critically, no, I could switch sides now and I could take a critical line on these books. But if I do this video, you can tell already, right, how long it's going to go on. Yeah, so let's not do that now, okay? And we could do that some other time, okay? I'll think about that. Question 6, and the cliche is, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I meant to talk about a book that I think made me a better person for having read. Now, sadly, this is the one book that I can't put a picture of the cover because I can't remember the title, the author. It could have been an edited book rather than an authored book. It could have been transcribed interviews that a journalist made. The chapters were the growing up stories of various gay men. The men had lived in different countries, and they'd grown up in different decades, ranging from the 1920s right through to the 1980s. They talked about their childhood. They talked about how they recognized that they were different and how they made their way in a heterocentric culture, how they concealed or didn't conceal their sexuality, how they met other gay men, and whether they wished they'd done anything differently, how they felt the future also was going to go. And at the time I read it, we're talking about the mid to late 1990s, I was still attending an evangelical Christian church, and I was being taught that same-sex attraction was a choice and it was a sinful one. Now, I already had my doubts about that. And so reading this book of biographies, it convinced me that homosexuality was not a choice and that my church was wrong. And that was a pivotal book because it wasn't many months after I read it that I finally took the decision to stop attending. And I want to say this because I also found that book in a public library. And what with all the book banning, particularly in the United States, I thought, pardon me for another little rant, but I want to say that book banning is never about protecting children. It is about protecting the power and the potential income of religious and political institutions. Right? Churches teach, parents, certainly mine did, take authority over what your children read because that's how you hopefully control what your children believe. Now, churches say they want to preserve faith, but faith is out of their hands. Faith is out of their hands. What they want to preserve is membership, and children of church members are the surest source of future members and therefore continued income. Personally, I don't believe children are protected by book banning. I feel book banning is a form of intellectual abuse. It does not allow young people exposure to other experiences and ideas. And I'm going to speak from my own experience because I joined my church when I was 13 and I stayed until I was 39. And during that time, I was strongly discouraged from reading anything except the Bible and church-published literature. That book banning impaired my ability to evaluate and make decisions. It impaired my ability to understand and interact with other people, and it prevented me from understanding myself. Question 7. The cliche is love is blind, and I'm meant to find a book that makes something of that fact. So, regarding blind love, I'm going to start with Molière. Tartuffe by Molière is a 17th century French comedy, and it's about a man who gets taken in by a con man called Tartuffe. Tartuffe presents himself as a great religious leader. The play got Molière into a lot of hot water with the Catholic Church authorities in France. In fact, if he wasn't so well loved by King Louis XIV, I doubt we'd know anything about Molière today, because I think that's how much the church would have wanted to suppress his work. Question 8. The cliche is ignorance is bliss, and I'm supposed to talk about a book that I know is bad, but I don't want to admit it, or a book I don't want to read in case it's bad. Richard, I'm so sorry. I'm going to rebel. You know I am a bit of a rebel. That's not a surprise, right? I don't think of books as good or bad. I don't like using those terms. There are books I feel sure that I would enjoy less than other people. And so I'm going to interpret the question that way. Okay, let's talk about really disturbing horror. That's probably going to be too difficult for me to cope with. I'm not going to rule it out, but I would really have to plan that reading carefully. I'd actually have to distance myself from the story by either reading it very slowly, just a couple of pages, then go away, a couple of pages, go away, or by approaching the text purely as some academic analysis exercise. And that's going to be tough, because if the narrative is really compelling, you want to fall into a book when a book is written well. But that's going to be difficult, because it's just going to be too disturbing to let myself do that. I do own one book that I am a little afraid of, and that is this one. It's Tender is the Flesh by the Argentine writer Agustina Bazterrica. I bought it because I was in Waterstones, I was browsing, and one of the bookstore staff, she was enthusing about this book. She was saying, oh, it was fantastic, and yet she was also saying it was the most disgusting thing that she had ever read. And at the time, I thought I should stretch myself a little. I should try. If the book's good, people are talking about it, let's give it a go. I'd also like to read at least one other novel by Stephen King. I did read Carrie way back in the 1970s. You know, I was in high school. Every high school kid was reading Carrie. So I read Carrie. And it scared me, yes, but it was short. And I think that's why I took a risk on Tender is the Flesh, because that's not a very long novel either. But all of King's other novels, they're just massive. They're massive, and I'm afraid I won't be able to cope with all the dark stuff he can do and get to the end of the book. But I do like thrillers and mysteries, and I've heard that some of King's books, they kind of wander into that territory. So maybe the nature of the darkness would be different. I'd be able to cope with it better. If anybody thinks they know the best King novel for me to try, I'd seriously appreciate a comment. Thank you very much in advance. Question 9 is There's No Time Like the Present. That's the cliche. And I'm supposed to pick my favorite contemporary book. Well, there's always a lot of hype, isn't there, around new novels. And my habit is to just let time pass so some of the crazy dies back. Really, truly good books, they retain their own ongoing excitement. If you wait 3, 5 years, even better, the title is still being given prominent space in bookshops. That is, it's on the tables rather than left on the shelves for you to dig around and find, or the cover is still turned out to face you. You've seen those things in bookshelves, right? Or there's a little note from staff. A lot of UK bookshops have that. I don't know if that's also true in the Canada and US and other bookshops, but they're obviously trying to bring those in front of your eyes first, meaning that they figure you're a good chance that you're going to like them or be attracted to them. And so that's what I start looking for after 3 to 5 years, is those books that are still being treated like that, because I figure they must have a quality or qualities that make them worth checking out. And by that time, of course, I'm also more likely to be able to borrow the book or buy it secondhand. So I am getting like a maximum guarantee of quality with minimum spend. Now, one new release that I am watching is this. It's James by Percival Everett, because I was wowed by Erasure. I think I'm going to read everything Percival Everett wrote given time, and that's pretty unusual for me to pick a writer and want to follow every single book. But I feel pretty sure that this book is going to continue to vibrate with its own energy long after all the marketing hype has quieted down a little bit. Question 10. The cliche is better safe than sorry. And so I'm supposed to recommend a book that I don't want to read in case it's bad, or it says also, or vice versa. Well, if a book is good, I mean, I want to read it. That's not a problem. And of course, we know what I think about bad books. So let's just talk about books that I just don't want to read, or I'm less excited about reading. And this is more of an issue in nonfiction. I run shy when the subject area is something like economics, or it's one of the hard sciences or maths, because I fear that I'm not going to understand enough to get any benefit from the book. That's a fear I need to overcome. Probably those books, they just need a bit more of my time. I need to pause and look things up. But it's daft to ignore those subjects, right? It's making my understanding of the world decidedly lopsided. So I went onto my library's ebook service and I took out this title. It's by Eugenia Cheng, X plus Y, a mathematician's manifesto for rethinking gender. And that's because I am interested in gender subjects, but I couldn't begin to guess what a mathematician would bring to that subject. And I have to know. It may be difficult for me to understand, but I'm going to give it a try. Richard, thanks so much for the invitation to this tag. If for no other reason, I've challenged myself in a couple of areas. I'd like to tag, I was going to say some new booktube creators. They're not always new. Some are new to me, but some are truly just new. And so I'm kind of shouting out to them, because really it's a sneaky way of advertising their channels and saying, why don't you go there and check them out? Because if I like them, I think you would like them. And here they are. So I'm shouting out, I am tagging Uma at Uma Praharshitha, Kristen at Normal Not Included, Reed at Big Strong Book, Renee at Beyond Books, Ellen at Ellen Made Book Club, and May at Mega Whopping Cosmic Bookworm. I just love the name of that channel, May. I just love it. I wish I'd thought of it, but never mind, you got there first, and I say go over there. They've got some cool material. And thanks everybody for checking out this video. I'm going to be moving on, because as I say, we're on a 3 video recording day today, so got to get to the next one. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.